I started out with this title, Mama Said There'd Be Days Like This. And the truth is that I used it 2 years ago, but not the talk. Just the idea, like, oh, wouldn't that be fun? And then sit down and see what happens. And of course, stuff happened. And the idea, of what I might share today came forward. I often say that I sit down a week in advance and I start reading, and then I just move through my days with the intention and the idea, and all of this stuff says, pick me, make it about this, make it about that. And then even yesterday afternoon, when I thought I was certain, something else began to unfold. And this morning, when I thought I was certain, something else began to unfold. And I had this little suspicion in me that, well, isn't that what the Divine Mother is all about? She just says, trust me. Trust me. And at some point, what do? We let go and we trust. That really, this isn't about me or any one of us going out anywhere and figuring it all out and making sure everything's lined up so that it'll go well or else. It's really about trusting. And I do have something that I arrived at that I wanted to share today. Simply, the title of this piece, Mama Said There'd Be Days Like This. There are two parts to it. One of them is that Mama said something. The original song is it's written from the perspective of a teenager who's been jilted in love. Whatever his name was, asked the other girl out or something, and her mother said, don't worry, this too shall pass, you'll get over it, and you'll be glad that it didn't work out with him or something. So, anyway, Mama said there'd be days like this. But in addition to that, there's this piece that perhaps the author of the song didn't arrive at the wisdom of Mother's words right away. Most likely, if she was anything like me, she tried every other angle before giving any consideration whatsoever to what Mama said. Yeah. Neat thing about the Divine Mother, being willing not to be heard right away and to still be there later when we're ready to listen. So, first of all, Mama said something. And how many of you, including myself, would do everything else first before we would come back and give any consideration at all to what Mama said? And she'd be there quietly, ready when we were. And didn't even have to say, I told you so. She was just there with that same answer, that same wisdom. There's something in us that wants to go out and discover it for ourselves. And there's something in the principle of Divine Mother that is willing to wait and to let us do that. I almost brought a picture of this morning of me when I was about 11 years old, sitting at the Unitarian Universalist Church I grew up in with Dr. Benjamin Spock, who had come to visit in the 70s. And he ate with the kids, at the potluck afterwards. And so there's a picture in the newspaper of me sitting very pensively with Dr. Spock, And I thought, isn't that funny? I'm not going to bring the picture, but my mother was most likely guided by him and others saying, just let her go. Let her figure it out for herself. She'll be back. Because that's really another part of that wisdom, of that relationship. So yes, on the one hand, we have this idea that Mama said something. And then we have our own need to discover, our own need to find out. And that's not all bad. Because really this dance between that which created us and our own becoming, it's ongoing. They call it in developmental psychology this process of differentiation. And if you think about it, we're really doing it from the moment we leave the formless and take form, right? And then we begin to journey back into formlessness at some point when we're ready. In the meantime, though, we are spirit made manifest, going out there, constantly dreaming more and becoming more. That is our nature. That is our divine nature. Is to have an idea and to want to make a life out of it, want to make a reality out of it, want to create it right away. And apparently we're surrounded by all of the forces and the resources necessary to realize any and every one of those dreams. And of course, it's not that straight, it's not that simple, it wouldn't be very interesting or exciting if we just created without any bumps or curves in the road. We have all these dynamics of relationship. Because even though we're all manifestations of the one life, we're individual experiencers of it. And we're all rubbing together and blending together and creating at the same time and having different dreams and similar dreams and opposite dreams and, and same dreams. We're all doing this at once. So it gets very interesting. Because on the one hand, many of us have good advice for one another, just like sometimes mom's advice was what we really needed. But we're also like the child who needs to go out there and discover it for himself or herself. And that divine parent knows that we need to be free to do that and to have that experience. So they're both going on, and it's a dance. It's a dance that goes on forever. Many of us have spent hours reading books and going to groups and classes and thinking, okay, what is this thing about me and my mother that propels me forward or holds me back? What is it? I must know, because as soon as I figure out, then I'll be able to whatever. It's an eternal question with an eternal answer that most likely shifts every day, like creation itself. Just layers of understanding added each time we ask the question. New understanding. I thought for the longest time, if I could just get everyone to honor my need to discover and to create and leave me to be free to do that, that I would be fine. But if it was only that, I would be alone. So this other piece of being willing to identify and go to and reach for that wise and patient and waiting, divine, feminine, all-knowing presence in whatever form within myself in meditation, perhaps in a prayerful, thoughtful conversation in my mind and my heart with my mother, perhaps in mythology, perhaps in poetry, perhaps just walking on the beach or in the woods. If I can find a way to reconnect with and ask for the wisdom and the guidance of that principle, she is there waiting for me, and she has answers for me. In the most perfect, pure sense, there is no hand on the hip saying, you should listen to me first. There is no impatience or judgment. There is a constant givingness of life, again and again and again, no matter what. There's some incredibly profound reading, just the stuff that's out there. Just soak up and think about this principle that is within each of us, known as the divine feminine archetype, and the activity of that part of us. It's beautiful. I know for myself that it is not something that I have embraced, because more of me has been out in the active, creative, get it done, find the next horizon, do the next thing, be the next me. No, but we really need both. So on the one hand, there's this idea that Mama said something. And on the other hand, there's that part of us that doesn't really want to listen to her first. But we go further and we realize that sometime when we're ready, we come back. And that wisdom is there for us. And it's all just part of a natural cycle that goes on forever. Right? The other piece of this is that there will be days like this. That was the particular advice that originated in that song. There will be days like this. And Judith just shared about one of them. There will be days when you question your capacity to believe. When you're right there being asked, what do you want? And the truth is, this eternal givingness of spirit, of life to itself again and again and again, that's in each of us, gives whatever we ask of it. But it can't force feed us. It can't give us what we're not ready for or open to. So that's the relationship. The gift is there for the asking, but the asking must take place, just as you did on that day. And then we find out when we have our hindsight, when we look back, how perfect it all was. How clear it is that divine providence was there all along. That's how that works. But in those days, there are days when we just don't know if we can make it through. And if we take a deep breath and lighten it up and just look at the girl in high school who was having a rough time, we can remember that it applies to the little things that seem so big. And it applies to the big things. Because in spirit, there is no big or small. It's all good. It's all magnificent. It's all great. I have one other piece that comes to mind for me. As an individual, on Mother's Day, I chose to follow this path of spiritual discovery and development that led me to where I am. This irresistible calling that wouldn't let me go. I tried to do other things with a nice paycheck that were real easy. Just show up, do their bidding and be done with it. And I just couldn't stay because that life in me demanded expression in another way. So I kept following it and going back to it. It called to me until my relationship with it was right. As a result, I'm a minister. Mother's Day happens on Sundays. My relationship with my mother was mostly good. It probably had your average number of bumps in it. Your average number of power struggles and times that were a little bit more difficult than others. Most of them probably when I was 17. It had that. And I loved my mother. I learned a lot about beautiful things from my mother. She said, if reincarnation is real, I want to come back as Ella Fitzgerald. She loved to cook. Way before Martha Stewart. She was gathering morels and fiddlehead ferns and wild asparagus and just making every beautiful thing with her bare hands. Long before that was popular. And she taught me all of that. And did all that for me. I remember that she made my own little pinafores with matching little bloomers or something. When up until age 3, maybe. And all kinds of clothing and costumes in between, all the way up to making my prom dress by hand in 1976. And I'm not sure at the time that I appreciated that as much as I do now. She did everything with her heart in her hands. The other thing is that my mother made her transition when I was 24. That's 27 years ago. So every year about this time, it's Mother's Day. And I have wanted to be somewhere else. And I can't because of this calling and this commitment. I could cheat and get someone to cover for me and not deal. Or I could be right here in this experience that truly many of us are sharing. I tried to get out of it 2 years ago because I was candidating in Washington. And I said, don't want to be first. And I don't want to talk on Mother's Day. And that's exactly what I got. That's exactly what I got. The truth is that whatever percentage of us came from a beaver cleaver kind of family where everything was rosy and everybody did exactly what they were supposed to and nothing wrong happened. I don't even know if that exists. Okay. So there's that kind of Mother's Day thing going on out there a little bit. And the rest of us might be quietly relieved that we're talking about this concept from other angles in different ways. Perhaps we had a great relationship with Mom and she's no longer here. We had a terrible one and we're still working on it. We had an awful one and she made a transition and now we have to write letters and burn them and try to work it out alone. Whatever. That's the real deal of this opportunity coming up every year. To take a look at it. Those holidays do that, you know. How many people are really having your average kind of day? Really. The other thing is that Julia Ward Howe created this holiday. She worked at a long time at it, and it was originally destined, it was called forth by means of that proclamation as a day for women to get together in the support of peace. It had to do with husbands and sons coming home from the Civil War, either dead or bloodied and broken. And it didn't have to be that way. So Mother's Day was originally founded by this bold woman in Boston in the late 1800s to be about peace. It became something that was about selling flowers. It became something that was about selling greeting cards. It became something that was about selling chocolates. But you know what else? It became something about honoring mothers. It became something about stopping to love them or work on that somehow. And that original, persistent idea of peace didn't die. Because this is 143 years later. And what do? We go on the internet and discover what Mother's Day was really all about. And it lives again. So just like any other persistent good idea from Mother, this idea of peace is alive. It insists on living. It insists on being perpetuated. And maybe, just maybe, we're at that point in our experience. We said, yeah, Mama said there'd be days like this. And she was right. She was right. So we're going to close this with a prayer. And just take a moment to honor all whose memories we have placed here. And recognize the spirit and their collective wisdom. We know that there is one love in this universe, one presence, one warmth, one life. And it is eternal and boundless. It is loving, it is giving. It is fullness, it is wholeness. It is constantly extending itself, giving rise to new life. It is wise. It is warm. It is patient and compassionate. It is unattached to whether we think that its great ideas were our own. It cares only that we find our way and live well. It is the Divine Mother in each of us, in the earth, in the stars, in every breath and beat of our hearts. And so we give thanks to every representation of this love that we have ever known. Great-grandmothers, grandmothers, mothers, ourselves, sons and daughters. We give thanks to every friend or stranger who has offered a wise word, a moment of comfort or understanding, who has been patient with us and allowed us to think that some great discovery was our own, has wanted only the best for us through thick and thin. We give thanks for all of these. And in this great gratitude, we simply release our word, knowing that this is the nature of things, and we fully and completely accept this gift every day in every way, knowing that this magnificent archetype, the presence of the Divine Mother, is within each and every one of us, and all life, giving life eternally. In full acceptance, we simply release this word, knowing that it is already so. And together, as we open our eyes, we say, and so it is.